I knew something had changed the moment my daughter slid a birthday card across the table without looking up from her phone. It wasn't even a real card. It was the kind you grab from a gas station rack, the ones with balloons printed on cheap, glossy paper that feels slippery between your fingers. No handwriting inside except her name, signed in a hurry, the loop of the Y still open like she'd run out of patience before finishing it. My son-in-law sat across from me chewing his steak, the good ribeye I'd bought and marinated the night before, and laughed at something on his own screen. My granddaughter, who had just turned 9, was the only one who'd made me a card with her own hands. Crayons. A wobbly heart. She'd spelled grandma wrong, but she'd meant every letter. I was 67 years old. I had driven 40 minutes to be at that dinner table, and the women who shared my blood had remembered to text her real estate agent twice that afternoon, but not to ask me how I was feeling. That was a Tuesday in October. By Thursday morning, I had made a phone call that changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is not important, but my history is. I worked 31 years as an office administrator for a regional insurance company, the kind of job that teaches you exactly how much paperwork quietly holds other people's lives together. When my husband passed 8 years ago, a fast cancer, the kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already won, I thought the hardest thing I would ever do was learn to sleep in a bed that felt too wide. I was wrong. The hardest thing turned out to be watching the people I loved most slowly stop seeing me. My daughter was 41 when all of this happened. She worked in real estate, which meant she understood money in the abstract way people do, when they spend a lot of time discussing other people's. Her husband managed a distribution center and had strong opinions about things he'd read half an article about. They had one daughter, my granddaughter, who had her father's chin and, thankfully, very little of his certainty about himself. The financial arrangement between us had grown the way most quiet arrangements do, not with a conversation but with small moments of need that I answered, because that's what mothers do. And then again, until saying yes felt less like generosity and more like gravity. After my husband died, my daughter had called crying about a gap in their mortgage payment. I helped. Then it was the car, then private school enrollment, then a home renovation loan I co-signed because the interest rate was better with my credit score attached. Each time she called it temporary. Each time, temporary turned into permanent without either of us marking the moment it happened. What I didn't fully understand until that October birthday dinner was that I had become, in my daughter's mind, less a person and more a function. The phone calls had changed over the years in a way I only recognized looking back. They used to start with, "How are you?" Then they starting with, "I need." Not even hello sometimes. Just, "Mom, the quarterly insurance is due and we're short this month." "Mom, can you move some money before Friday?" "Mom, the school is asking for the deposit." My voice on the other end of the line had become the sound of a solution, not a person. I want to be fair. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't calculating in the way villains are in stories. She was just someone who had been allowed, slowly, by a mother who couldn't bear to see her struggle, to forget that her comfort had a cost. That birthday dinner was the first time I saw it clearly. Not just felt it, saw it. The gas station card. The phone face up on the table. My son-in-law not once asking what I'd been doing with my time since we'd last seen each other, which was 2 months ago. And the moment that crystallized everything. My daughter answering a client call mid-dinner, stepping away from the table for 11 minutes, while her 9-year-old quietly cut my birthday cake into slices and handed me the first one with 2 hands, the way I'd taught her to offer things to people she loved. A child had to teach her mother's mother what her mother had forgotten. I drove home that night on a highway that was dark and nearly empty. I didn't cry. I don't say that to seem strong, I just didn't. What I felt wasn't grief exactly. It was something colder and more precise, like finally reading the fine print on a contract you'd signed years ago without looking. I made chamomile tea when I got home. I sat at the kitchen table, where my husband and I used to do the crossword puzzle on Sunday mornings, and I opened the folder I kept in the 3rd drawer, the one with the bank statements, the co-signed documents, the automatic payment authorizations. I spread them out like a hand of cards. The numbers, when I added them up, covered 6 years. They were not small numbers. And for the first time, I asked myself the question I'd been too afraid to ask before. What did I get in return? Not money. I never wanted money back, but something. Presents. A birthday card that wasn't bought in a hurry from a gas station. A phone call that started with "How are you?" and meant it. I sat with those papers for a long time. My husband's reading glasses were still in that drawer folded. I didn't know why I'd kept them there. Maybe because his hands had been the last ones to fold them. I touched the frames lightly. What would you have told me to do? I said to the quiet kitchen. He was a plain-speaking man. I knew exactly what he would have said. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I called my financial advisor before 9. She had handled my accounts since before my husband died, a sharp and careful woman who asked good questions and never made me feel foolish for not knowing something. I told her what I needed. She listened without interrupting, which is a rare thing. "You're sure?" she said when I'd finished. "I've never been more sure of anything since I signed the mortgage on this house," I told her. By 10:30, I had begun the process of removing my name as co-signer from the home equity line of credit. By noon, the automatic monthly transfers to my daughter's account, the ones as I'd set up 3 years ago to cover what she called shared family expenses, though the family doing the sharing was always hers, had been suspended. By 2 in the afternoon, the supplemental card on my account that my son-in-law had been using since the previous spring, when he'd said his personal card was between cycles, had been deactivated. I made myself a sandwich. I watered the plant on the windowsill that my granddaughter had given me for Mother's Day. I sat down with a library book I hadn't managed to open in 2 weeks. The call started at 4:17, my daughter first. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text, "Mom, something's wrong with the account, call me." Then another, "This isn't funny, I'm trying to pay for things." Then my son-in-law, which almost never happened, which told me the card had stopped working somewhere inconvenient. His text was shorter than hers and had a different energy, less confused, more certain there had been an error, the way men sometimes are when they've never seriously considered that the world might be declining to cooperate with them on purpose. I turned the phone face down. I read 4 chapters of my book. I made pasta for dinner. I washed the dishes by hand the way I'd always preferred, feeling the warm water and thinking about nothing in particular. By 8 that evening, the tone of the messages had shifted. My daughter, "Helen, I don't understand what's happening. The school said the automatic payment didn't process. I had to call them and explain. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" I read the word embarrassing twice. I thought about my birthday dinner. I thought about 11 minutes at a client call and a gas station card with an open Y. I didn't respond. My son-in-law sent one more message late that night. "We need to talk about this like adults." I put the phone on its charger and went to bed. In the morning, my granddaughter called. This was unexpected, and it stopped me in a way the other calls hadn't. She was 9, and calling from her mother's phone, and her voice was careful in that way children's voices get when they've heard too much of the adult world and are trying to hold it lightly. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart," I told her. I meant it. "Dad was kind of loud last night," she said carefully. "I know, that's not your worry." A pause. "Did something happen?" I thought about how to answer a 9-year-old honestly without giving her something too heavy to put down later. "I made some changes," I said. "Grown-up changes. Everything is going to be okay." "Okay," she said then quietly. "I saved you a piece of the cake from the other night. I put it in the freezer." I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I said. "That is one of the kindest things anyone has done for me in a long time." She didn't understand why her grandmother's voice caught slightly on the last few words. Children often understand more than we think, but not always the specific thing, and that's a mercy. My daughter arrived at my door on the 3rd day. She did not knock the way someone arrives to apologize. She knocked the way someone arrives to correct an error they believe you've made. Quick, certain, a little impatient. When I opened the door, she was already talking. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to explain this to me," she said. She was in her work clothes. She looked the way she always looked, put together, efficient, running slightly behind on something. The co-signed paperwork came in the mail, and I had to explain to Brent that his mother-in-law was withdrawing from our loan without any conversation. "Do you know how that looks?" I stepped back and let her in without speaking. She followed me to the kitchen because that's where conversations in this house have always happened. I poured 2 cups of coffee. I set hers in front of her and sat down across the table. "Mom," she said, "what is happening?" It wasn't a question. It was the beginning of a case she was building. "I made some financial decisions," I said. "That's what's happening, without talking to me?" "You didn't talk to me before you started using my account to pay for things I hadn't agreed to pay for," I said. My voice was even. I want you to know it was even. I hadn't planned what to say. I just found that I was done pretending the conversation we were having was a new one. "The card your husband has been using since April. The transfers for the school fees, the cosign that I did as a favor and that somehow became a permanent arrangement." She set down her coffee. "Those aren't the same thing." "They are, actually." "I needed help," she said, and there was a flicker of something younger in her face. The daughter I remembered from harder years, the one who called me crying when her first real relationship ended and when the job she wanted turned her down. You've always helped. That's what you do. I know, I said. That's what I've been thinking about. So now you're punishing me? Because I had a busy birthday dinner? I looked at her. Is that what you think this is about? One dinner? I don't know what it's about. You won't tell me. I'm telling you now, I said. It's about the fact that for the last several years, I have been paying for pieces of your life, and you have stopped noticing that someone was paying. You call me when something is needed. You don't call me when it isn't. I sat at my own birthday dinner and watched you take a client call, and I thought, she would not do this to a client. She would not serve a client a gas station card. The word landed. I saw it land. That's hard was, I was running late. I grabbed. I know, I said. That's exactly it. You grabbed. You've been grabbing for a while now, and I made it easy, and that's on me as much as it's on you. But I'm 67 years old and I have a life, and lately, it only seems to matter to anyone in this family when it has money attached to it. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I heard the refrigerator humming. I didn't realize, she said finally. The words were smaller than the ones before them. I know you didn't, I said. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. You weren't trying to hurt me. You just stopped seeing me. Her eyes went glassy. She didn't cry, but she held herself very carefully, the way people do when they're deciding whether to. What do I do now? She asked. You figure out your own finances, I said. You call me on a Tuesday for no reason. You show up to things I care about the same way I show up to things you care about. You teach your daughter that when someone gives you something, you say thank you and you mean it. Because she already knows that. She learned it somewhere, and it wasn't from watching you lately. That last part was hard. I said it anyway. My daughter left an hour later, not in anger, in something quieter and more difficult than anger. I stood at the window and watched her car back out of the driveway, and I felt the complicated love a mother feels for a child who has disappointed her, and whom she loves completely anyway. And I understood that those two things were allowed to exist at the same time. I didn't know what she would do with the conversation. People hear things at different speeds. Some things you plant and they take a season. Some things take years. I had decided I was done waiting for things to bloom on a schedule that was convenient for everyone but me. The following week, my son-in-law called. This surprised me. He was not a man given to reaching out unless something needed to be fixed, and I couldn't figure out immediately what he thought I could fix for him now. But the call was different, he said, slowly, and with the uncomfortable cadence of someone who is not used to this kind of conversation. I think I owe you an apology, for the card. For a lot of things, actually. He paused. My wife was up until 2 in the morning looking at our actual budget for the first time in probably 3 years. I didn't realize how much we'd been relying on you. I thought it was more occasional. I didn't add it up. Most people don't, I said. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It isn't. Another pause. She cried, he said, about my daughter. She called her college roommate and cried for an hour. I've only seen her do that twice. I didn't say anything. I just wanted you to know, he said, that she heard you. I think it's going to take her a little time, but she heard you. After we hung up, I went outside and walked around the block twice. The air was cold and smelled like fallen leaves in someone's fireplace. I passed a neighbor walking a very old dog, the kind that moves slowly and smells everything with great attention, as though every blade of grass is a book worth reading. I stopped to pet him. He's 17, the neighbor said. Still wants his walks. Good for him, I said, and I meant it. A week later, my daughter came back. No client call energy this time, no work clothes. She was in jeans and a sweater, and she brought a container of the butternut squash soup. She knows I like the kind she makes at Thanksgiving. She stood on the porch holding it with the same way her daughter offered me a slice of birthday cake. And she said, I thought maybe we could just sit for a while. We sat for 3 hours. We talked about things we hadn't talked about in years. Her father. What the last 8 years had been like for me, in ways I'd never said out loud. What it felt like when I retired and stopped having colleagues, and then stopped having a husband and found that the world had become very quiet in a way nobody prepares you for. She listened. She asked questions. She refilled my tea without being asked. At some point she said quietly, I think I learned somewhere that you were okay. Like, fundamentally fine, no matter what. And I stopped checking. I probably let you think that, I said. It was easier. It wasn't easier for you. No, I admitted. It wasn't. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her fingers were cold from the drive over. I'm sorry, Mom, she said. I'm genuinely sorry. Not for the money. For not seeing you. Those were the words I had needed to hear for longer than I'd known I was waiting. I didn't cry then either. I just held her hand and looked at the window and thought about how long it sometimes takes for the people who love each other to figure out how to actually do it. My granddaughter came with her the following Sunday. She walked in carrying a drawing she'd made during the week. A house with a garden and two figures standing in the yard, one tall, one small, both of them smiling with their arms around each other. She'd labeled the smaller one, me, and the taller one, Grandma, and beneath the whole thing she'd written, in careful letters, "We are not forgetting you." I taped it to the refrigerator. There are things I know now that I wish I'd known 20 years ago, or even 10. That love is not the same as convenience. That being needed is not the same as being valued. That a person can disappear quietly over years in a house full of people who mean well if she keeps making herself easy to overlook. I'm still 67. My knees tell me about it every morning. I still live in the house where my husband and I did crossword puzzles on Sunday and where my daughter used to call me from upstairs instead of walking down. The house is quiet now in a different way than it was. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of a woman who has finally stopped bracing for the next thing someone needs from her. My financial advisor sent me a note after everything settled. She wrote, "You made the right call, in more ways than one." I keep that note in the third drawer, next to the folder, next to my husband's folded reading glasses. Some mornings I make tea and sit at the kitchen table and just exist inside my own life for a while, without anyone waiting on the other end of the phone for me to solve something. It sounds like a small thing. It is in fact enormous. My daughter calls on Tuesdays now. Sometimes she has a reason. Sometimes she doesn't. Last week, she called to tell me she'd seen a red-tailed hawk on the power line outside her office window and thought of me, because I once told her red-tailed hawk's mate for life and she's never forgotten it. "Did you know that?" she said, excited the way she used to get as a girl. "I did," I said. "I'm glad you remembered." We talked for 40 minutes about nothing important and everything that mattered. That is what I was waiting for. Not the apology, not the reckoning, not the moment she understood what her convenience had cost me. Though all of those things needed to happen. I was waiting for a Tuesday phone call about a hawk, for soup carried with two hands, for a child's drawing on a refrigerator that said, "We are not forgetting you." Dignity, I've learned, does not announce itself. It doesn't demand a ceremony or a verdict. It simply waits quietly inside you until you decide to stop giving it away. I stopped, and the morning after I did, the world was still exactly the same size it had always been. But for the first time in years, so was I.